Hello, folks. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking around. We've got a change of guest. Look at that. It was almost...
aged a decade. It's still me, Sam. It's Sam from the future. I'm just a lot older, more world-weary now.
Sam, who has been through the Sins RPG in real life.
Wow.
No. This is Ross. Ross runs the website, the Instagram page, the Twitter feed, the Twitch channel, better known as More Games Please. How you doing, Ross? Welcome to the UK Games Expo stream.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. So little bit of self-fangirl, because I do love all the beautiful artwork you put out on your Instagram and your Twitter and everything like that. But for folks who aren't using the UK Games Expo to chat to all the cool people on the internet, tell us a little bit about yourself, and what kind of got you started with More Games Please. What is it all about?
Sure. So I was getting into the I think I'd describe it as modern board games, because obviously there's the classic board games that we all know and grew up on, and plenty of people still love. But modern board games, the ones that have very recently been designed and released, I started getting into them over the last, say, 10 years. And it was through mutual friends and friends I had that introduced me to new board games. And when I started collecting my own games, I was super passionate about it and really enthusiastic about it, but I also understood that my own friends, there was probably like a level of interest that they had. And I studied film, and so film and photography have always been really a real point of interest for me. And I wanted to kind of enjoy capturing what I was playing at that time. And so I decided to start an Instagram. Before that, I'd had like a travel Instagram, because I spent a couple of years going around the world. So I had like an Instagram that was all the different places I went and stuff like that. So for me, sharing my own experiences through a platform like Instagram is something I've been doing for a long time. So it felt like a kind of natural fit to be like, and here's the games I'm playing. So I decided I would make my own Instagram, because I thought my friends would probably tire of that pretty quickly, to just be like game after game after game that they've never heard of. So I thought I'd just make a whole separate thing. And I was really blown away by how big the community was on there, and how positive the feedback was, and how enthusiastic everyone was, because I was completely outside of all of that. I didn't go to game cafes. I didn't go to conventions. I wasn't part of any community. It was just me and a couple of friends who played some games together. So it was a whole world that I wasn't really aware of. I mean, I knew a lot of people enjoyed stuff, but I wasn't a part of it. And this was like my first kind of segue into becoming part of the wider community.
That's tremendous. What was the first show that you went to?
It was the UK Games Expo. Was the first one. Yeah. And the reason I went is because a friend of mine that I'd met in Australia, who's German, was taking part in a Netrunner tournament, and he said, "Hey Ross, I'm going to be in the Netrunner tournament. Do you want to come to UK Games Expo in Birmingham so we can meet up and say hi?" Because his sister had, this is a convoluted story, but his sister had a baby in Germany, so he was back in Germany to visit his sister, and then he loves Netrunner, so he came to the UK Games Expo to take part in the Netrunner tournament, and he was like, "Hey, I'm going to be there, let's hang out." I live in Nottingham, which is very close to Birmingham, and so I was like, "Yeah, I'll come along. I'll get a weekend ticket to UK Games Expo so we can hang out a bit." And so that was my first time visiting, and that was my first convention. It's a big convention to be your first convention.
I was going to say that's a bit of a baptism of fire.
The Netrunner tournaments, I'm a Netrunner fan. Love the game. Did he just sort of go like, "All right, I'm going to play this game for 7 hours now, Ross. Enjoy Hall 1."
Yeah. Basically, we met up and we had like a hug and a chat. And he was like, "I'm in this Netrunner tournament, but there's rounds, so like I can meet up with you like sporadically during the day." And I was like, "Well, that's cool. Like, I'll just see what it's all about." I was like already really enthusiastic about board games, but the scope and the scale of it was, still beyond me. So for me, it was really just like, walking around a convention and just having my mind blown really by, like as all of us know, when you have like a little 5-game collection at home or a little 10-game collection at home, which is still a very sizable collection.
Yeah.
And then you go to an event that has all of this, and you go, like, wow. And so yeah, it was like a real baptism of fire for me, but it was also a really exciting thing for me to witness.
Yeah. See, I really like this because now we have Expo, the soap opera, but also at no point, even though you weren't ditched by your mate, you didn't become like the football widow or widower. It wasn't the gaming widow, because you had all this other stuff to do as well. So I quite like that. That's very good.
Yeah, so we've already got Bass1 Mo, who is mentioning that you've gone from this wide-eyed, amazed chap at an expo to now you're running live solo playthroughs on Twitch on Wednesdays and Mondays, and you're playing games with everybody almost around the world. That's an amazing sort of arc there.
I think it's a reflection of a level of addiction to the hobby that I probably didn't anticipate when I first started picking up games, because I made the mental choice. I remember the real tipping point for me in terms of getting into the hobby was before I started the Instagram and before I started my website, which we can talk about if you want, and before I did anything else, I basically was living in a shared house at the time with a bunch of friends. And we would watch movies. We'd have a movie night and we'd watch movies together. And I was already enjoying board games with other friends. And I made the choice. I've always liked games. So I've always console gamer, PC gamer and all that kind of stuff. Played a lot of video games. But I was, at the time I was thinking, do I get a console that we can play together on a screen? And I thought that separates the house quite a bit. And some people don't really like video games, and there's a level, like if you're competing on a video game, the skill levels are quite different. And I thought board games are a way to bring people together that is less screen time, less people necessarily being directly competitive, more sociable.
Yes.
And so I made like a choice to not get a console, to buy board games instead. And it's really nice, actually. I saw some of my friends, because I've basically been a recluse, as a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And I saw some of my friends this weekend, and they were like itching for me to introduce them to some new board games. So much they were like, we've only got, because I'm the one that, as you can see, a taste of my collection behind me. I'm the one that has the library of games. Like over 200 board games, which is definitely too many, but that's how many I have. And they were like, they always come. Monday night was the board game night around my house, so they would always come around since I left living with them. And each Monday I was like, do you want to play a new game or something So they really, it's nice to be that kind of person to your friends, because I was lucky enough to get that for me through someone else that introduced me to the hobby. I can't remember what my point was.
We were just sort of talking about how you've kind of come from like this wide-eyed chap who was like, no, I've got 10 board games. That's good. Oh my gosh, what is this NEC shenanigans? And now you mentioned your Monday night games with your friends, and I know because I tune in, because I'm a sucker for Twitch, and I do enjoy the stream. On Mondays and Wednesdays, you kind of recreate that with your Twitch channel, don't you? You sit down, crack open a game, and get attacked by tentacles on a spaceship.
The idea behind
less disturbing than it sounds.
Yeah, less disturbing.
A family show. It's
out
okay.
Of context, It sounds strange. But if you put it in a sci-fi context, where it's a spaceship, Escape the Dark Sector was the game. It's which is the follow-on to Escape the Dark Castle, if no one's familiar with the title. It's a cooperative game where you're trying to break out of a space cell, get to your ship, and escape together collectively. It's cooperative. I like cooperative games. But for me, I decided to start streaming, and I know circumstances have pushed more people towards streaming than maybe previously considered it. But for me, I decided to start streaming because of some very positive experiences I had with streaming last year. I streamed with Big Potato, were kind enough to invite me to their offices down in Hipsterville, where they live. It was Shoreditch, so that's
Big
just,
Potato
yeah,
are quite
Yes,
hip
it is.
in general, I think.
young cool people hanging out in a cool location. Anyway, so I went. That was really fun. And then Essenspiel in Germany, Asmodee Live invited me onto their stage and stream there, and I really enjoyed it. And I thought, no one's going to invite me onto like things like this very often. So if I want to do it, I've got to I'll do this myself. So before Christmas, I made a decision this year I was going to stream, and my first stream was New Year's Eve, and I started streaming, but very sporadically at the start of the year. But this year the idea was always to try and recreate a kind of game night feel with my streams, to feel community based, conversational, welcoming, less presenter, more
Invitational. Hey guys, you're hanging
kind of
out, or-
like this is what I'm doing, and we can hang out and chat about it while it's going on.
Nice.
And as a viewer, I think you've nailed it. It's a lovely stream to join in. You get to have a bit of a chat with yourself and through the Twitch chat and have a bit of a gab. And it doesn't always stick to board games. Sometimes it veers off into like a regular game night kind of thing.
Yeah.
Wherever the conversation takes it, really. Anyone who runs a stream, as you both know, you are the host, and you guide the conversation. However, chat, can throw all kinds of things your way, and there can be some incredible conversations you can have because of that you didn't necessarily anticipate. Like any conversation, it can drift, but I like that.
Yeah, and it's very much the same thing. I remember reading a comment from Sir Terry Pratchett, which was, "I want to have a conversation with you. If you're just going to ask me questions, then essentially it's a quiz."
Yeah.
That's conversation much better on the thing.
So we've mentioned that you've played Escape the Dark Sector. I also really enjoyed the dexterity game. Was it Slide Quest? That was brilliant.
Yeah, Slide Quest. Yeah.
So
that's a lot of fun, that game.
It was, but it's not like I know some folks just dive into really deep games, or some people only play fun. It's a nice eclectic mix of working through your collection. You can see like there's viticulture behind you and Flamme Rouge and stuff there. Is that a kind of sample of your taste of games? Is you just happy to give everything a try?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing about board games is new experiences. So people often ask me do I have a top list, and I like new experiences. Maybe I'm always searching for that perfect game, and maybe that perfect game doesn't exist for me. So I just like the experience of learning new games and enjoying what they do and having new experiences. And I think that's why my collection is quite varied, but it also reflects the fact that part of how I've connected to the hobby and how I've encouraged my friends to connect to the hobby is giving them different experiences, so together we can find what we like to play as a group. And I have a very varied group of friends of very varied ages. So my game nights, would have people, because in my friendship group, one of our friends is in her 60s, some of my friends are in their 20s. So we're really broad, we're an eclectic mix of people. So, and I've basically been, for most of them, their introduction to the hobby. And there are, your bread and butter styles of board games, but I'm interested in what is on the fringes and what things are kind of different experiences and unique experiences that aren't maybe core board gamer as such. Like Slide Quest, you wouldn't consider that a core board game, but it has mechanics that modern gamers would like. And if you've enjoyed toys at any point in your life, then
I don't know if anybody's enjoyed a toy.
I mean, one or two people for me, a definitive part of my childhood was Hungry Hippos. And if I could ever love a game like I loved Hungry Hippos when I was little, then I will play that forever and ever. And I've not ever recreated that. But yeah, my board game collection is all kinds of it does steer towards lighter games and shorter games, because if you're playing on a weekday evening after a long day at work, maybe you don't want to dive into something that's 3 hours, 4 hours. You want to play something that's an hour, and you can chat, and it can take 2 hours. But I love
Yes.
like a really broad spectrum of games. It's not really one type of game that I would stick to.
And the one thing I've always noted on your streams is they always look absolutely gorgeous. Like I think it's an understatement that the consideration into your like the table layout and everything that part of where it comes from
Tremendous
your
aesthetic.
yeah, is that part of your film and photography kind of creeping into stuff?
I don't know. I think I just have an appreciation for when things look good. I think for me, you know, if we're talking about illustration and graphic design and art, it shows an element of care. I mean, it often reflects budget, let's be honest. Like, if you can't afford a good artist, you're not going to have one. But, you know, there is an element of care that goes into creating something that has a lot of craft in it. My partner's a freelance illustrator, so I'm not steered by the fact that she illustrates, but one of the things that one of the ways I first knew about her was that she was drew. I have a lot of let's say I'm trying to think of the right word. I can't think of it. My brain's gone empty. Basically, I put a lot of value on people who have refined their craft. Let's put it that way. And if someone's been able to develop something in a style, so I really appreciate it when people put thought into stuff, not just from a base level, but extra things. And I'd never like to use the term perfectionist because I'm so far from perfect, but I'm always trying to think about ways I can improve. And one thing that I feel about my particular table I play in is I wanted it to feel less like I was playing in a static location and feel a little bit more vibrant than that. And if you play on the same table every stream, I don't know, it kind of like when I looked back at the pictures of my early streams, it felt a bit samey, even if I was playing different games. And I thought, well, how can you mix that up? Well, you can have different backdrops, different settings, change the camera angles. There's different things you can do to make it a little bit more engaging to people who tune in. And then you can take it a step further and you can say, like, for example, Escape the Dark Sector we streamed on Monday, you can say, well, it's a black and white game. Well, let's have it on a dark backdrop. So that really pops. That really pops. Or, you know, if it's a colorful game, you can bring some extra color in through the rest of it. Try and make it thematic. I only have what I have in my house, but, you know, you can try and make it a little bit more. So I'm always kind of looking at ways that I can make my setup, because board games are static. How can I make my setup a bit more engaging to the eye?
And when
that's very cool. It also makes the idea that perhaps if you do it sufficiently well, it looks like you live in this enormous honking great big mansion.
Yeah. I don't live in like a little terraced house. I've got like I've got so many game rooms. I have a different game room every day.
This is just my black and white games. This is my co-ops. Love it.
That would be really amazing, wouldn't it? Yeah. Oh gosh, let's go and build that house in The Sims. Hang on. But the streams are very relaxed. I mean, I don't think you'll be too offended to say these aren't like the sort of teaching games. You're not there to
please
say.
Don't try and learn from me, please.
Yeah. So, but it does feel like that kind of. We have a little bit of a chat, and then you do sort of give us a rules explanation, and then we dive in, and we can see. So they are a wonderful kind of show of what it would be like to come round to More Games HQ and join in your Monday Games Night. It's great. I really appreciate that. And I get the feeling from these streams, that kind of friendliness kind of crosses into all of the sort of media you kind of create, because you do a lot of gorgeous photography. I think that we can show a few folks if we do this, we can see some of these. So you've got like there we go. So Whatnot, PAX Pamir second edition, one of the photographs there you've taken of the game kind of laid out on this lovely sort of wooden backdrop, and it's got all the different cards, and then Fort with all the extra bits, everything laid out. These are all sort of very in the style of the game, but also quite welcoming and warm in kind of colors. These aren't just for giggles though, are they? These are actual work you've done for these game companies, isn't it?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough. So we talked about how I started out on Instagram just posting to follow my gameplays, and you know I was enjoying it, so I put more. I looked to see how I could do it better. And I remember after like I don't know, I'd been posting photographs on Instagram for like 9 months, and I thought, why don't I use a more professional camera to do it? Like, why am I only ever using my phone? Maybe I could take better photographs if I spent a little bit more time and effort into it. And there was no end goal. Like, I wasn't doing it to be like, I'm going to break into the industry. I was just like, I could be taking nicer photos. I really enjoy photography. It's something that I have a passion for. Like I said, like when I went traveling, I posted a lot of pictures online of my travels, but mainly it was because I just took so many photographs because I really enjoyed it. I traveled on my own, and some of my favorite memories, it sounds kind of sad, but it's some of my favorite memories. I met a lot of incredible people, but I also had days where I'd be walking around the countryside on my own, just with a camera, just seeing things. And it gives you a different way of looking at stuff. And I think you start to appreciate things in a different way when you start looking at them a lot closer, and you have less of a passive view of something and you start looking at the detail of something. And I think photography changes the way you look at the world around you in a way that's hard to appreciate if you're not actively taking photographs. And I just enjoyed it so much. I continue to do it with games, and I was always trying to find interesting ways to look at stuff. And I also, I still, even though I've been in the hobby for a number of years, I still kind of view myself in some ways as an outsider's perspective, in that I came at it just randomly, and I didn't have wasn't introduced via the board game community. So my entrance to it was very scattershot and very sporadic, like a lot of people, I guess. Yeah. But I also view it from the perspective of, I want my friends to enjoy it, so I want to make it as warm, as welcoming as possible, to encourage other people. And I view it from the perspective that when you present things and when you talk about games, you want to make it as accessible as possible to whoever's listening or whoever's looking. So that's part of my mindset with it as well.
It's very much that whole, it needs to be a cracking shot of whatever it is to get the sort of almost the emotion of the game, or the bit. So there's some in your reel there where you're wanting to look at more. You know, whilst you've got to focus, there's that. And I especially love the Women's Land Army, where it looks like they've just stopped and like, well, maybe we're walking past this field and here are these, you know, slightly hobbity looking women.
Yeah,
and
it's
marvelous.
When I created that scene, I wanted it to feel like people.
Yes.
I mean, like the minis that are in the middle of it, that's how they come. They do come as a collective, so they certainly have that. But building like the landscape around it, it wanted to be like you were peeking in on some people enjoying a moment, and that's how with the way, like, people photograph games in lots of different ways, and I think that's one of the nicest things about board games is you can photograph them any way you want, because they are, you know, very individual and very personal. The way I try and photograph games and things is I want to show you what the game is. Like, one of my primary things, especially in my page work, is I want to accurately reflect what the game is. I want to make it look good, but I want you to be able to look at it and actually know what the game is whilst looking at it, because you can get very artistic in photography, and I think like I really personally enjoy accounts that have a really artistic flair, but from my perspective, I want to accurately reflect a product whilst doing that. I try not to talk in terms of product, because games mean more to us than just a product. But you know, I wouldn't be doing this. But I want to try and accurately capture like what am I looking at here, and like you say, like draw the eye to be like, I'm interested in knowing more about this.
What I always wonder with some of the shots that you see in like Kickstarters or in the social media for games, have you followed the rules when you're putting down the tiles or putting the meeples? Do you go into that level of? Yeah,
every single game I photograph, I read the rule book. I watch rule videos if they're available, and that's part of how I do it. Like, part of how I do it is it's meant to accurately reflect a real game state. So if you look at it, it's not just some stuff thrown on a board. It is actually, that is a mid-game point. So the more complex the game, the more time-consuming that actually is. Sometimes it's a rod for my back in some ways, because you are trying to accurately reflect a game that takes 3 hours to play, and I'm trying to show a midpoint to the game, which means like even when I was just doing it casually for Instagram, because the way it started is I was taking photographs of the games when I was playing them.
Oh,
I didn't want to do that to my friends like a lot of the time. So what would happen is after we'd finish the game and they'd leave, I would then try and rewind the game to like a certain point of where we were at. And then it would be sometimes it would be like, oh, I didn't take a photograph of the game when they were around. So I'll get the game back out and I'll actually play 3 or 4 different players' turns to bring the game to a state where the board states are more interesting, but still accurate. And so for me, that's part of how I've always photographed them is I want to show what the game actually is, not my own creative vision of what the game could be. It's like, no, this is actually the game.
Yeah, so it's not just like if we put the red pieces over there and the blue pieces over here, this will give us a nice looking. It's actually how it would have been if you get halfway through the game and everybody then just nips outside for the barbecue or something. I don't know.
If everyone vanished.
The rapture, maybe.
Be gone. I must take photos of the game, and you can come back.
It would make my life easier if I could make people vanish halfway through a game and then take some photography. But
so
I think you also avoid nerd rage, don't you? Someone's like, why have they got that in there? You can't get that unless you've got, and it's like, it's okay, guys.
You have to understand that there is a certain element of the community that are incredibly passionate and understand, like they understand the games really closely and they want to see their games accurately reflected. So for me, I am also mindful that people will look at that and they'll go, well, that's just a load of nonsense. So what is that? And so, I want to be able, anyone who looks at it can go, oh yeah, that is the game. And it looks really nice. That's cool.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite ones you've photographed? What have you enjoyed the most?
It's tricky because I love all games equally. That's what I'll tell clients. I love all of the games equally. I do enjoy games that are not necessarily typical in their art style, and I think we haven't really talked about. I've ran a website for a couple of years, interviewing board game illustrators, and part of what I really enjoy about the industry as time has gone on is there's people who are outside of the industry that have come in and illustrated games, and they may have completely backgrounds that have nothing to do with games in any way, but someone's seen that art style and they've brought them in. So for me, like a lot of the appeal is just good art. So I like taking photographs of games that have good art in them. Some of the easiest games to photograph have miniatures because they have a verticality about them. They cast shadows. There's a lot of like presence on the table. So like from a perspective of what is easiest to photograph well, personally, I think any game with minis and miniatures, I think they're really easy to photograph because they have like this presence and this physicality in the world already that's quite easy to showcase. And I think it becomes more challenging to photograph games well, the flatter they are, the less vibrant they are, and then you have to get creative to how you're going to bring some personality to them. But it's all an interesting puzzle. And so I derive a lot of satisfaction from figuring out how to photograph something. Again, this is like, I enjoy the process so much. Like I don't really have favorites. I have favorites to look at, but I don't necessarily have favorites to photograph.
Oh, okay. And you mentioned a little bit your website there. We haven't got the link. moregamesplease.com. Yeah, .com. And you've done awards for board game illustrations. Tell us a little bit about what you went through doing them. Tell us what.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the idea behind my website was I was really interested in finding more out about the illustrators in the industry before I started my website, and there just wasn't really anything out there. Like, in all honesty, there just wasn't the coverage of it. I was surprised because, again, like at that point in time, I didn't know a lot about the board game industry, but I saw all these cool looking games, and I thought, oh, let's find who's the illustrator. I'm going to read something about them. I couldn't find anything about them, anything to do with board games. Anyway, no one was really talking to them. Like there was the odd interview every now and again, but not really any effort to kind of like deconstruct that and look into that or shine a spotlight on what they were doing. It's always designers, publisher designers, publisher designer, publisher designer, and reviews, which all are equally as valuable. But I was curious about something different. So the reason I I started Instagram in March. By June, I had a website that I'd paid for, and I was interviewing board game illustrators. So that's how quick it was. It wasn't like I was like, oh, 5 years later I decided to start a website. It was like, no, I would like basically cannonballed into the swimming pool of board game content creator, and I was just very enthusiastic about it. And again, like, my goals weren't for that to be a thing. My goal was, I just want to know. I just want to know more about it. So with my Instagram, I just like taking photos, and with my website, I was like, I just like talking to people and finding out what they're about. And at the end of the first year that I was running that website, I just wanted to vote on the best board game out of that year, and there were no votes. So I made one. That's literally what it boiled down to. Like, I just wanted to read about board game illustrators. No one was really talking to them. I just wanted to vote on the best art of the year. No one was really doing any votes. So I made one. That's what it boiled down to. This is something that I thought was important. I really enjoyed the work they did. It wasn't being reflected, particularly in the community. So I wanted to kind of do something about that. So it's always been public. It's always a public vote, public nominations, public vote on the most popular choices of those nominations. So it's not to do with me. The idea was it was meant to be, what's the community's opinion on it? Okay. I mean, I run the website, but it's not my opinion, and I don't state what my opinion is. Like, the people I've interviewed reflect my taste. That's undeniable. Mm-hmm. But also, I have gone outside of my own tastes to reflect what other people enjoy as well. And yeah, the art vote that I've done for the last 3 years is the idea is just reflective of what people are enjoying at that point in time. And the idea is it's not to be like, this is the best art. The idea is to encourage conversation about what the best art is, to get people to talk about it and to appreciate and recognize who the illustrator was on a game that they enjoyed. Because they might go, oh, I really loved Everdell. Oh, that game, it was so great. I love the art. But then they never wonder who the artist was.
Yes.
And what's nice about it is you go, oh, it's Andy Bosley. And then you go, oh, what else has he done? And then maybe you find some new games that you connect with in the same way.
That's very cool.
Did any of the artists ever find it a bit odd that you were talking to them? Because you said, we do always talk about designer and publisher. It was designed by and it was published by. Did any of the artists be like, well, you asking me? What was it? I mean,
especially when I started, people were like, oh, it's really nice that you want to talk to me.
Oh,
oh, it's really nice. Yeah, and that was part of what kind of encouraged me to continue is they also wanted to talk about it.
Yeah.
They also wanted to talk about what they were up to. And I thought it was nice to have that conversation. I'm not saying when I started the website I was particularly great at doing my interviews, mainly because when I first started, I didn't think anyone would want to talk to me. And I was really shocked when so many people did. Because when I started, I was like, oh, how can I make this like as unintrusive as possible for the people I'm interviewing? So to start with, I just sent them the same 10 questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I'd been running my website for a while, an illustrator said to me, like, why not become more personal with the questions you ask? And they were right. And so I did. And then like I would write questions based on whoever it is I was speaking to. And to make it more conversational again, to make it more of less Q&A, more a conversation, but and let the conversation guide what we discuss. Because it's written format, it's not a recorded interview that I do. This is text-based, and it's by email is how I conduct it.
Yeah.
So that is how to get a conversational style out of a very static way of communicating is a challenge in itself. But that was one way I tried to let them guide the conversation, and follow-up questions were based on the conversation we had.
Oh, it's lovely. And then, so it then evolved into the competition, not a competition, the award, the best board game art of a year. What was like an unprecedented amount of admin did you drop on yourself there, or?
Yeah.
Just
Was there a point in the first one you thought, oh, okay, but how did it go?
So the first time I did it, I was manually taking all of the data and putting it into a spreadsheet myself. It wasn't getting put into a spreadsheet. I was manually taking it from, because I don't think the website I used linked up with Google Docs or anything like that. So I was having to like manually put it all in myself. And I remember it ends around Christmas time. On Christmas Day, I was inputting data into spreadsheets, and then I closed it. I closed it at midnight on New Year's. So at 2 a.m. or like 1 a.m. on New Year's Day, I was closing the vote. And there's like certain things where sometimes you think like, why are you doing this? Like, what's the driving force behind doing something like this? That on Christmas Day you're doing data entry for an art vote. Yeah. And I just like it. I'm a weird person. I just liked the idea of it, and I didn't mind the admin that came with it. And as it progressed, like I was lucky that the integration on the website improved, so then it would input the data into a spreadsheet, and I wouldn't have to do that. There's still there's still a lot of work that goes into doing something like that, because like, you know, the 2019 one, like there was thousands of votes, so there's still an element of admin that goes into something like that. And then, you know, getting in touch with the publishers and getting in touch with the artists for statements, like to say, like, is there anything you want to say about the games? Letting them know what people have said about the games that have been nominated and stuff like that. So again, like trying to encourage a level of connection and conversation in the result, rather than just like, here's 10 games. These are my top 10. Like, it's not about me as much as I can remove myself from a website that I run and curate.
Yeah.
I remember one year, I think it was like the first or second year, said, if this is a public vote, why's your face on the award? Because it's like a little...
Oh yeah, it's got your lovely little logo.
Thing. And I was like, because I run the website, like I don't know what you want from me. This is the website.
Because I'm putting data into a spreadsheet on Christmas Day for it. Please, you know, that word is worth an award at least. It's a really, really lovely. You know, it's. I think the overriding thing I feel when anything you kind of create, Ross, and it's a credit to yourself, that it's all just very welcoming. Like, it doesn't feel like the sort of award where you're going to be elbowing somebody out. Nobody, I think, was like, oh, what do you mean I came third? It's like genuinely like, oh, look at all these gorgeous things and I'm third, kind of thing in it.
Yeah, it's a thing that exists just to exist. It's not like this year when I ran it, I had a couple of publishers said like, do you have like an award banner that you can give us, so when we've been nominated we can use an award banner? And I was like, it's not really about that. Like, it's not like I don't want it to feel that slick. I don't want it to feel like nominated for and have these like, say like BGG, which is, you know, like a big, you know, a company, or like a convention like UK Games Expo. When there's awards, it's more prestigious. Mine's going to feel just like we're just a bunch of people who enjoy a thing. So I don't want to have these like professional banners that go with it, which is good because I don't have any. But I didn't want to make them because that's not, again, like you said, it's meant to feel open and welcoming and just like a conversation about art, rather than like, this is important. No, the conversation's important. The result is more of a process of that conversation. It's the end goal of the conversation, but it's not the thing that's most important.
So in this, was there ever any ones where you were like really surprised, like, oh, it's not my favorite, but it's really surprising to see that in the top 20, 30, 10, 5?
I mean, every year I'm surprised by games that get suggested, because art is so subjective.
Yeah,
and
massively so, yes.
And so like every year I look and I go, really? And I like you know, people are like, oh, have you ever thought about doing like your top 10 ugliest board games and things like that? And that would be really easy to do. It's very easy to say, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And to look down on something. But then you get other people going, well, I really like it. I find a quality within that I really enjoy. I connect with it. There's nostalgia, or they like the simplicity of appearance, or they like the color scheme, or they like the style of it. And so every year without fail, there are games that I'm surprised by. You know, I think that with Oh, just generally, that's one of the most fun parts of running it for me, is to go look at all of these games that I never would have known about if other people hadn't nominated them. And I think that that for me, there's a huge level of curiosity into knowing what other people enjoy, because again, the vote isn't about what's best; it's more about appreciation. So. Games being outside of what I appreciate is fantastic, because that's a conversation right there. Straight away, if you like different things, you've got more to talk about than if you like exactly the same thing. I think that's my opinion.
No, it's a really, really great way to kind of think about it, and
I suppose it's also the experience of the game as well, is that we've gone for this slightly nasty, say the equivalent of greasy dirty burger on a Friday night,
sure,
because that's how this game plays and that's what we want to it.
That's the world. It's a world of eating a dirty kebab on the way home at 3
yeah, exactly. Which at that point of the evening is exactly what you need. Whereas, you know, next time you might be going to, you're Nottingham based, so let's go to Sat Baines and get the Michelin, however many stars it is, for kerflumbers of pounds.
I think you've got the wrong idea of what my life is. Well, let's just say I'm in
your games mansion.
I'm in Sat Baines every week.
Oh, obviously you have a chef. I apologise. Yeah, no, you're
I've got a living chef. Yeah,
foolish of me.
It's me. I'm the living chef.
Living chef. Yeah. Okay, cool. Cooking with Ross, is that going to be your next channel?
Nah. I don't want to inflict that on anyone.
Bass One Mo, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. They asked, will there be a 2020 version? Are you thinking about it? Yeah, or
so like before we went live, I was saying like I'd really like to do a 2020 version. I went full-time freelance in the industry. Like I've been working in the industry for a few years now, but I made the leap to full-time freelance December last year. It's been an interesting 2020. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So a lot of my time and energy has gone into finding new ways to generate income or keep productive and all those kinds of things. So my energy hasn't gone into the website in the way that I anticipated and wanted it to at the beginning of the year. But the goal is that I want to put more love into it and do a 2020 best art thing. And it's always at the end of the year. So when I do the nominations are all of December. So the nominations open in December and run for the whole of December, and then the vote is at the start of the next year.
Okay.
So that, if like, you know, there's a mailing list on the website. If you go on moregamesplease.com, you can sign up to the mailing list. But you know, if you follow me on Twitter or whatever, like I'll be putting it out there around about the time. You know, if that's something you're interested in.
And just to say, this is not like it's not a publishers nominate the games. This is not like our awards. Some of them are submitted by the publishers. This is purely the gaming community.
Correct.
So I can say, you know, I really love the art from, and it's not a game this year. It's just any game. Is that right?
Has to be a game released within the last year. So it's the best artwork of 2019 was games released in 2019.
Nice,
best artwork of 2020 would be the games released in 2020. So it does make it more challenging for people to know, and you have to kind of follow the wave of the new. So there is, you know, it does limit things in that way. But the idea behind it is that to celebrate the artwork of the last year and to talk about what's come out and to maybe see things that you weren't aware that existed.
Yeah.
And that's the idea behind it, for you to look at your collection, and if you've bought any games within the last year, to go, oh yeah, what were the ones that I really liked the look of? Or to look on your wish list and be like, oh, these are the games that I really like the look of this year, look really cool and interesting, that I didn't get to play. And that, again, it's just to encourage conversation and celebration of the illustration work that's going on within the community, rather than making it of all time each year. Having quite a static list that probably celebrates the most popular games that have come out over the last 10 years. And it would be like quite a similar list, I think.
So what are your kind of eyes on for your awards this year? What have you enjoyed?
I never talk about my own tastes. No, because I think one of the things that I am aware of is that I don't want to steer the conversation. I think it can be very easy to... It's one of the reasons also why previously I've interviewed illustrators that have been in the top 10 nomination and have not posted their interview until after the vote.
Oh, okay.
Because I don't want to have this tentpole interview with someone who's in the top 10 and then ends up, oh, they've won it because everyone who visits my website is looking at that artwork and then goes to vote. So for me, like, I don't.
Said, oh yeah, that's cool. Let's do that. Yeah.
I don't want to steer the conversation in that way. I mean, I certainly have my own opinions, and I don't mind sharing them really. But the whole idea is like in terms of what I think should win an award.
Mm-hmm.
That's not why I run my website, and that's not what that is about for me. Because I want to encourage other people's opinion, and I think when you run a site, you do have an element of responsibility to not try and steer things, and you can't help it in some ways because whoever I've interviewed, they'll have more visibility on the website that you'll be then nominating and voting on. However, if I did like Ross's top 10 of 2020 and then did a vote for 2020, if there were similar games on it, I would feel like that maybe I'd influence that in some way that I didn't really want to, because again, it's not about my tastes, it's about creating conversation. And I know you can tell your tastes and then invite conversation, but with a vote, I think there's a little bit too much crossover there.
No, that's a really, really great way to kind of think. Yeah, I guess I'd not kind of thought about it in that manner. It's I'm
an overthinker.
No, I think hopefully folks can tell from the way your passion and the way you spoke about board games today and the consideration you put in everything from like the backdrop of the game to the awards that you kind of, and I know you've said it's supposed to be a casual community kind of fun thing, but there is a great level of love and knowledge in everything here that has just come through just trying some games and enjoying them way back when little baby Ross with his first board game.
Yeah. 4 years old with a full beard on his face.
This is
crocheted,
just
obviously.
you shaved at the start of the show, didn't you? That was it. Yeah,
that was it. Just while we were waiting, it just came back while we were in the waiting room. No, I like because I work for a publisher. I work for Alley Cat Games, and games are products, and money is made through games industry, and people buy games, and there's an exchange of value. But for me, like, one thing that is why I'm here, like why we're having this conversation, why I've done anything that I do, is because I enjoy that. There's a joy I have in all of it, and that I derive my own personal enjoyment out of sharing with other people. And so that is my driving